the quiet little pocket of Medellín tucked just off El Poblado, the morning after it ended. 7 months. A little over 9 grand, wired and handed and covered in pieces small enough that I never once felt the whole weight of it while it was happening. And here's the part that took me another full year to actually understand. The money was the cheap part. I'm Luke. I've spent the last 7 years moving between cities in Latin America, and I make these videos to tell you what I actually saw down here, not the glossy version that sells plane tickets and dreams. This one is about a woman I'm going to call Catalina, because that's close enough, and about the 7 months I spent quietly financing a relationship I was sure I was simply in. By the time we're done, you'll know exactly what it looked like from the inside, the specific things she did, the specific things I saw and decided not to see, and the reason none of it, not $1 of it, would have worked on a version of me who had his head screwed on straight. I need to say one thing before I start, because it's the whole spine of this video. This is not a warning about Paisa women, it's not a warning about Colombian women, or women, full stop. It's the story of one particular person who made a particular set of choices, and one particular gringo, me, who left the door standing wide open, and then acted shocked when someone walked through it. If you take a single thing from the next half hour, I'd rather it be the second half of that sentence than the first. The guys who leave here blaming a whole city learned nothing. The guys who leave here understanding the door, those guys actually get somewhere. If you're thinking about doing some version of this yourself, moving down, dating in a new country, restarting your life somewhere warmer and cheaper, or you just want to know what it's genuinely like, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Now let me tell you how I met her. This wasn't my first stretch in Medellín. By the time this particular chapter started, I'd already put close to a year in the city across a couple of stays, so I want to be honest. I wasn't some wide-eyed kid who'd just gotten off the plane and didn't know which way was up. I knew the neighborhoods. I knew that El Poblado is the gringo bubble, and that a lot of what happens inside that bubble is theater staged specifically for the men who live there. I'd already learned to be a little suspicious of the whole Parque Lleras scene, the square where the nightlife concentrates, where the transaction is so out in the open it's practically got a menu. So going in, I thought I was inoculated. I thought the danger looked like a nightclub. That was my first mistake, and it's one I want you to write down. The version that gets you is almost never the version you already know how to see. I'd rented a 1-bedroom in Manila for $1,300 a month. Furnished, a little balcony, quiet street, the kind of place a working professional actually lives rather than a party high-rise full of guys on their 4th aguardiente at noon. I'd chosen Manila on purpose. I was 36 by then. I did remote sales consulting for US tech companies 15 or 20 hours a week, and I wanted a normal life, not a bachelor party set. And here's the thing about the economics that you have to understand clearly, because everything downstream depends on it. Medellín has a genuine, real, undeniable population of foreign men with disposable income. That's just a fact. And where there is a real population of men with money, an economy grows up around them. That economy is not evil. It's not a conspiracy. It's water. It's the environment. The only question that ever matters is how you personally choose to swim in it, and whether you can tell the difference between someone swimming next to you and someone quietly attaching a hose to your bank account. That's the whole tension of what I'm about to describe, because in any relationship where you honestly earn more than the other person, and if you're an American pulling dollars in Colombia, you almost certainly do, there is a completely normal, healthy zone where you cover more. You pick up more dinners. You handle the nicer trips. That's not exploitation, that's just math and decency. But there's a line. On one side of that line is generosity, given freely, from a good place. On the other side is a slow, structured draining of you that gets dressed up in the exact language of intimacy so you can't tell them apart. Learning where that line actually is, that's the entire ballgame, and I want to walk you right up to it. I met Catalina at a rooftop place in Provenza, that trendy cluster of streets inside Poblado, where the cafes cost about what they'd cost in Denver. And I want to describe her accurately because if I turn her into a cartoon villain, I'll have failed you completely. She was 31, she had a real job, or at least a real-sounding one, doing something in dental administration. She spoke enough English to be funny in it, which is hard. She was warm without being over the top, and, this is the important part, she did not present as transactional at all. She rolled her eyes at the tellerist scene the same way I did. On our second date, she insisted on paying for the coffees, and she got a little sharp when I tried to stop her. That right there was the masterstroke, though I wouldn't understand it for months. The women who are going to work you don't come at you looking like they're going to work you. The whole thing runs on you thinking you found the exception. She built herself as the exception, and I bought it wholesale because I wanted an exception to exist. For the first few weeks it was, honestly, just good. We'd get lunch in Manila, walk over to Envigado on the weekends where it's more local and less shiny, cook at my place. I paid for most things and it felt right, because I earned more and I liked doing it. Nothing was wrong. And I need you to sit with that, because this is the trap's actual mechanism. Nothing was wrong for long enough that when something finally was, I'd already filed her under safe. The exploitation didn't start with an ask. It started with a runway. It started with weeks of her building enough trust and enough real affection that the first small request landed on solid ground instead of on suspicion. The first ask came in week 5, and it was almost nothing. That's the design. Her card wasn't working. Some issue with her bank. Could I cover her phone bill and she'd get me back? Maybe $40. Of course I did. Who wouldn't? And she did pay me back, fast, which cost her $40 and bought her the single most valuable thing in this entire operation. Proof, in my head, that she paid people back. She spent $40 to install a belief, and once that belief is installed, every future ask gets measured against it. She always pays me back becomes the story I tell myself right up until the day the story is very obviously false, and I'm still telling it anyway. From there, it escalated the way these things always escalate. Not in a straight line, but in a slow recalibration of who was responsible for what. Around month 2, there was a problem with her apartment lease. The details were genuinely complicated, involving a landlord and a deposit and a deadline, and I could help her bridge just this 1 month, and she was so embarrassed to even ask. I covered it. Around month 3, her mother needed a medical procedure. I remember the night she told me exactly, because I've replayed it enough times to have it memorized. We were at a little place off the main strip in Laureles, the grid neighborhood on the other side of the city that feels more like where actual Medellín lives, and she'd gone quiet over dinner in a way she never did. She didn't ask me for anything. That's the craft of it. She never once led with the ask. She just told me, with her eyes wet and her voice small, that her mother needed a procedure, that the clinic wanted the money up front, that she'd been calling relatives all week and coming up short, and that she was scared. And then she changed the subject and tried to pretend she hadn't said it, which of course made me the one to bring it back up, made helping her my idea, made me feel like I'd rescued her rather than been steered. Now, I want to be careful here, because sometimes a mother genuinely does need a medical procedure, and the real cruelty of this whole con is that it weaponizes situations that are sometimes completely, heartbreakingly real. There's no way to fully immunize yourself against it without becoming a monster who won't help anyone. But the procedure had a cost, and the cost had a deadline, and the deadline had a very specific number attached, and I paid it before dessert came. Then there was a business idea. A small salon she wanted to open with a friend, something she lit up talking about. And would I want to help her get it started, be a part of it? And here's what's beautiful about how that one was framed. It wasn't an ask, it was an invitation. It wasn't give me money, it was build a future with me. I put in about $3,000 on that one alone, and I want to tell you that I did diligence on it, that I saw a lease or a business plan or a single receipt, but I didn't. I invested in a startup on the strength of the fact that I was sleeping with the founder. And here's the exact moment the whole thing flipped over in my head. The moment I realized that X was not X, it was Y. It wasn't any single ask. It was the pattern around the asks. Because after a few months, I started, almost without meaning to, noticing the timing. The requests didn't come at random. They came right after the high points. We'd have a genuinely beautiful weekend, or she'd bring me to meet an aunt. Or she'd say something about the future that made my chest go tight. And then, within a day or two, there'd be a problem that money could solve. The affection spiked, and then the ask arrived riding on top of the affection. And when I hesitated on an ask, even a little, the warmth would cool. Not dramatically, just a degree or two. Just enough that saying no started to feel like it cost me something in the relationship itself. That's the tell. Read this back later if you need to. It was never the asking that was the red flag, because people in real relationships do help each other with money, and that's fine. The red flag was the correlation. It was the way her warmth tracked my willingness to pay, like two lines on a chart that moved together. Love isn't supposed to have a billing cycle. Hers did. Once I saw that, I couldn't unsee the rest of it, and the rest of it had been sitting in plain sight the whole time. The money conversations were always urgent, always a deadline, always a reason it had to be today. Her life was strangely compartmentalized. There was a whole network of friends and family I heard about constantly, and somehow almost never actually met. And when I did, the stories didn't quite reconcile with the versions I'd been told. And whenever I got uncomfortable, my discomfort got quietly turned around and handed back to me as my failure. If I questioned and asked, I didn't trust her. If I paused, a real man wouldn't hesitate to help the woman he loved. My hesitation became the problem in the room, and hers became a test of my character that I kept, idiotically, trying to pass. The thing that finally ended it wasn't dramatic, which is its own kind of lesson. These things rarely end with a confrontation. They end with a small moment where you suddenly see the whole shape at once. It was month 7. The salon had gone quiet. Every time I asked about it, the answer got vaguer. And then one evening she called me, urgent, upset, with a new emergency, a supplier who had to be paid, a friend who'd let her down, a number that needed to move by the next morning. And I noticed something as she talked. I noticed that I already knew the exact rhythm of the call before it finished. The warmth at the start, the problem in the middle, the deadline at the end. I could have recited it. And in that moment I wasn't even angry. I was mostly just tired, and a little embarrassed for both of us. I told her I couldn't this time. Not that I wouldn't, that I couldn't. And the temperature dropped so fast and so completely that I actually felt it land in my chest. And every single thing she'd built over 7 months, the warmth, the future talk, the exception she'd sold me on, all of it evaporated in about 4 sentences. I wasn't a partner anymore. I was a resource that had stopped resourcing. That was the tell doing its final, complete performance. We were over within a couple of days, and it was quiet. And that quiet told me everything the previous 7 months had worked very hard to keep me from knowing. I want to stop right here and ask you something directly, because I actually read these. How many of you watching this are seriously thinking about doing some version of what I did? Packing up, moving down, starting over somewhere in Latin America? Drop the city you're thinking about in the comments. Just the city. I read all of them, and I'll tell you honestly whether I've spent real time there. Okay, back to it. Because the next part is the part that's actually about you and me, not about her. So let's talk about what men get wrong here, because I got it wrong in both of the 2 ways it's possible to get it wrong, just at different points in my life, and you need to see both. The first way is the way I got it wrong with Catalina, and to explain it, I have to give you about 10 seconds of backstory, and then I'm going to drop it, because this isn't a video about my divorce. Before any of Latin America existed for me, I was a guy in Denver who got left, 4 months before a wedding, by someone I trusted completely, for someone I trusted completely. I came down here originally with a wound I hadn't looked at, and that wound had a very specific shape. It made being needed feel exactly like being loved. Those 2 things feel identical from the inside when you're hurt enough, and they are not the same thing at all. Catalina didn't need to make me love her. She just needed to make me feel needed, because my damage did the rest of the work for free. Every time I solved a problem for her with money, I got a hit of the exact feeling I'd been starving for. I'm useful. I matter. I'm the one who fixes it. She can't do this without me. I wasn't buying her. I was buying that feeling. And I'd have paid almost anything for it, which made me, in the coldest possible terms, the easiest kind of mark there is. Not a stupid one, a wounded one. Those are different, and the wounded ones write bigger checks. Now the second way men get it wrong, and I want to spend real time on this one, because it's the failure I watch more foreigners commit than any other, and it's the one you're actually at risk of after watching a video like this. It's the overcorrection. It's the guy who gets burned once, or who just watches videos about guys getting burned and swings all the way over to treating every single woman down here as a suspect. I see these guys in Poblado all the time. They've gone cold and cynical and transactional. They talk about women like a category of threat. They've decided the entire city is running one scam and they're too smart to fall for it. And I need to tell you something that took me a long time to be honest about. That guy is also a mark. He's just being worked from the other direction. The cynical foreigner who thinks he's being clever by keeping everything purely transactional The guy who's basically running a sugar daddy arrangement and congratulating himself on his realism, he's in the exact same economy Catalina put me in. He's just volunteering for it and calling it wisdom. Cynicism didn't protect him. It just made him worse company and got him the same outcome with less pleasant conversation on the way. And here's the thing both of those men have in common, and the reason I keep hammering the point I opened with. Catalina was a person. One person. She made specific choices, and she is not a stand-in for a nationality, or a city, or a gender. The same Medellín that produced her is absolutely full of women who earn their own money, who split the check and mean it, who'd be genuinely insulted by the assumption that they're angling for your dollars, and who, frankly, wouldn't touch a foreigner who walked in radiating suspicion at them. The mistake, the actual, precise mistake, is taking one data point and inflating it into a demographic. I have friends down here, real ones. Andrea, over in Mexico City, is still probably my closest friend in the world, and she'd laugh me out of the room for even needing to say this out loud. Reading a single painful experience as if it were a rule about a whole group of people isn't street smarts. It's just a lazier, more comfortable way of never having to look at the part of this that was about you. So what does it actually take? What do you actually do with all of this? Let me get tactical, because I don't want to leave you with a feeling instead of a tool. First, the boring infrastructure stuff, because boring is what protects you. Keep your money separate and keep it dull. Do not commingle finances early, and by early, I mean the entire first year, minimum. Do not invest in your partner's business inside that window. I don't care how good it sounds or how in love you feel. A relationship is not a startup, and if it somehow is a startup, then treat it like one and do actual diligence. See the lease, see the numbers, see the receipts, and watch how fast the temperature in the room changes the moment you ask to. That temperature change is your entire answer. If asking a normal, adult financial question gets you treated like you committed a betrayal, you already know everything you need to know. Second, watch the correlation, not the transaction. Stop asking yourself, is it bad that I paid for that? Wrong question. Ask yourself whether the affection in the relationship moves in lockstep with your spending. Does the warmth arrive before the ask and cool after the hesitation? Track it honestly over a few weeks. Real intimacy doesn't have a billing cycle. If yours does, you'll be able to feel the rhythm of it once you're actually looking. And once you feel it, you can't unfeel it. Third, and this is one people skip, does she have her own life? Her own income, her own friends you actually meet, her own world that clearly existed before you showed up and would keep existing if you left? Someone with a full, real, independent life is a wildly different proposition from someone whose life seems to reorganize entirely around your resources. That's not about how much money she makes. It's about whether she's a whole person standing next to you or a set of needs pointed at you. With Catalina, I met exactly one person from her world in 7 months. An aunt, once, over a rushed lunch, and afterward, when I mentioned something the aunt had told me about Catalina's job, it didn't line up with what Catalina herself had told me. Not in a huge way, just enough that if I'd been paying real attention instead of paying invoices, I'd have caught it. A real life leaves evidence everywhere. You meet the friends, the stories connect. The timeline holds together when you're not even trying to check it. If someone's world stays permanently just out of reach, and the few glimpses you get don't quite reconcile, that isn't shyness. That's a wall, and walls are load-bearing for a reason. Fourth, and this is the one that actually matters more than all the tactical stuff combined, so if the earlier list felt cold, here's the warm part. Be generous from strength instead of from fear. There is a world of difference between paying for a beautiful dinner because you genuinely want to and it makes you happy, and wiring money because underneath it you're afraid that if you don't, you'll lose her. Same transaction on your bank statement. Completely opposite act. One is a gift. The other is a ransom you're paying to your own insecurity. And the wild thing is that the woman across the table can almost always feel which one it is, even when you can't. Because in the end, all of the tactics are downstream of one thing, and it's the thing I had to actually go fix in myself before Medellín stopped being dangerous to me. You have to close the hole that makes being needed feel like being loved. A man who doesn't require someone to rescue is a genuinely hard man to exploit. And not because he's guarded, not because he's cynical, not because he treats women like threats. The opposite. He's hard to exploit because he isn't secretly shopping for rescue. He's not walking around with a wound that any warm, clever person can find and press. You cannot sell a lifeboat to a man who isn't drowning. The whole con needs you to be drowning first. So the single best thing I ever did for my dating life down here had nothing to do with women at all. It was getting to a place where I wasn't drowning anymore. And I'll tell you what that actually looked like, because do the work on yourself is the emptiest advice on the internet if nobody shows you the shape of it. For me, it was boring and slow. It was building a life in Medellín that was genuinely full before any woman entered it. A routine, work I was proud of, a couple of real friendships with other men who'd been down here long enough to be honest with me, a gym I went to at the same time every day whether I felt like it or not. It was catching myself, in real time, in the act of trying to be someone's hero and asking whether I actually wanted this person or just wanted the feeling of being wanted. Those two things stopped feeling identical from the inside, and the day I could reliably tell them apart was the day the whole city got safer for me. Not because I'd learned to spot the con, because I'd stopped needing what the con was selling. The kind of man who does well in a city like this, and plenty do, it's not a horror story, I still love Medellín, is secure, curious, generous because he wants to be, clear-eyed without being cold, and not desperate for anyone to complete him. The kind who gets taken apart is the one using money as a stand-in for his own worth. And that's true in both directions, remember. The naive giver buying the feeling of being needed, and the cynical buyer purchasing control and calling it wisdom, are the same wound wearing two different outfits. Let me bring this all the way home, that $9,400. I got over the money in about 6 months. Dollars come back. That's why I told you at the very top that the money was the cheap part. The expensive part was that for the better part of a year afterward, I couldn't trust my own read on people. Every warm gesture from a new person came with a little voice, asking what it was going to cost me. Catalina didn't just take my money. She took my instincts for a while, and I had to earn those back one honest interaction at a time, and that was the bill that actually hurt. So here's the one thing I want you to walk away holding. Exploitation is not something a type of person does to you. It's something that finds the specific, particular hole in you and fits itself to the shape of it. Which means the real defense was never going to be a checklist of 5 warning signs or a list of texts to watch out for. The real defense is not having the hole. I can't warn you about the women in any city on a map, and I wouldn't if I could, because that map isn't where the danger actually lives. What I can warn you about is the version of yourself that needs to be needed badly enough to pay for the privilege. Go handle that guy first. Everything else gets a whole lot easier once you do. If you got something out of this, hit subscribe. I'm in a different city every few months, and the next videos get into the stuff nobody puts in the brochure. The real cost of living once the honeymoon wears off, what month 3 actually feels like, and the difference between the men who build a life down here and the ones who just keep running. See you on the road.